Have you ever wondered why the American dream seems increasingly out of reach for the middle class? A question that echoes across the country as the middle class, the backbone of America, grapples with a silent crisis. A crisis that's reshaping the landscape of our neighborhoods, our cities, and our lives. This is the middle-class rent crisis. The concept is simple, yet its implications are profound. It's the steady tightening of a financial vice, where the cost of living, particularly rent, is skyrocketing, while wages remain largely stagnant. The numbers tell a stark story. In the past 20 years, rent prices have surged by nearly 70%. Meanwhile, the average income of middle-class families has barely budged. But the problem isn't just about rent and wages, it's a symptom of a wider issue, the growing wealth gap. A chasm is widening between the haves and the have-nots, with the middle class caught in the crossfire. The wealthy continue to accumulate more, while the middle class, the heart and soul of our country, is being squeezed out. Imagine the strain, the stress, the constant worry about making ends meet, the feeling of running on a treadmill, working harder and harder but not moving forward. This is the reality for millions of middle-class Americans today, and yet this crisis often goes unnoticed, hidden behind the facade of the American dream. But it's a battle that's being fought every day in every corner of our nation. A battle for financial stability, for security, for the opportunity to build a better life. The American middle class is facing an unseen battle, a battle against a rising rent crisis. It's a struggle that's reshaping our society, our economy, and our way of life. And it's a battle we need to understand, to acknowledge, and ultimately, to address. Because the future of the American dream depends on it. The reality of the rent crisis strikes hard, and it strikes deep. It's not a figment of our collective imagination, but a concrete fact, supported by hard data and real-life experiences. Let's take a moment to look into the numbers. Over the past 2 decades, rent prices have skyrocketed, rising at a pace that far outstrips inflation. In the early 2000s, the average monthly rent was around $700. Fast forward to today, and that figure has nearly doubled. We're talking about an increase of nearly 100%. Now compare this to the growth of wages for the middle class. It's a different story altogether. While rent prices soared, wages for the middle class barely budged. In fact, in the same 2-decade span, the average wage for the middle class has only risen by about 20%. So, let's put this in perspective. Imagine you're trying to run a race, but for every step you take, the finish line moves 2 steps further away. That's what's happening to the middle class. They're running as fast as they can, but the finish line, a comfortable, affordable home, just keeps moving out of reach. The gap between wages and rent isn't merely a gap, it's a chasm. It's a chasm that's swallowing up the hopes and dreams of countless middle-class Americans, forcing them to make impossible choices between basic necessities like food, healthcare, and a roof over their heads. This isn't a crisis that's happening somewhere else, to someone else. It's happening right here, right now, to our neighbors, our friends, our families. It's a crisis that's quietly eroding the foundation of the American dream, turning it into a mirage that keeps receding into the distance. The numbers don't lie, the crisis is real and it's here. And as we delve into the stories of the Johnsons and the Smiths in the next scenes, you'll see just how real it is. Meet the Johnsons, a typical middle-class American family. They are the embodiment of the American dream, hardworking, dedicated, and resilient. But they're also caught in the crosshairs of the rising rent crisis, an unseen battle that's reshaping the landscape of middle-class living in America. The Johnsons live in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in a suburban neighborhood. Dad works as a school teacher and Mom is a nurse. Together, they bring in a respectable income. But with the cost of rent steadily climbing, their budget is stretched thin. Every month, like clockwork, a significant chunk of their earnings goes to their landlord. The rent is a relentless drain on their resources, leaving little room for savings, investments, or even the occasional family treat. It's a balancing act, and they're constantly juggling their finances to keep their heads above water. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when they could afford to save for their children's college education, when they could plan for vacations, or even think about buying a house. But those dreams seem distant now, pushed aside by the pressing need to secure a roof over their heads. The Johnsons have made sacrifices. They've cut back on non-essentials, they've forgone vacations, and they've even started to dip into their savings. All this, just to keep up with the relentless rise in rent. It's a struggle A daily battle that's fought behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the world. But despite these challenges, the Johnsons persist. They wake up every day, determined to provide for their family, resolved to navigate this unseen battle. They epitomize the spirit of the middle class. Their resilience is a testament to the strength of countless American families who, like them, are grappling with the escalating rent crisis. And so, the Johnsons carry on, facing each day with determination and hope. Their story is a stark reminder of the realities that many middle-class families face in today's America. It's a tale of resilience and survival, of dreams deferred and hopes held high. The Johnsons are just one of the countless families navigating this unseen battle. Their story is not unique, but it's a story that needs to be told. It's a wake-up call, a call to action, a call to rethink the way we approach the housing crisis in America. Now, let's take a look at the Smiths, another middle-class American family. Meet the Smiths. They're your typical family with two hardworking parents and two school-aged children. The Smiths live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in a bustling city, where the cost of living has skyrocketed in recent years. Both parents work full-time jobs, yet they find themselves living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep up with the ever-increasing rent. Despite their efforts, the Smiths are caught in the grip of America's middle-class rent crisis. It's a silent battle they fight every month, calculating their income against their expenses, trying to make ends meet. The rent takes up a substantial portion of their income, leaving little room for other essentials, let alone savings or leisure. The impact of this crisis on their quality of life is profound. They've had to cut corners in ways they never imagined. The children's after-school activities, considered a luxury now, had to be halted. Dining out, once a delightful family tradition, has been replaced by home-cooked meals. Even small pleasures like an occasional ice cream treat for their kids have become a rarity. All these sacrifices, while necessary, have taken a toll on the Smiths. Their lives have become a never-ending cycle of work, worry, and more work. The stress of this financial burden is a constant presence, casting a shadow over their daily lives. The Smiths, like many American families, are not living beyond their means. They are simply trying to afford a basic right, a roof over their heads. Yet the escalating rent prices are pushing them towards an alarming edge, threatening their stability and peace of mind. The Smith story is not unique. It's a narrative shared by countless middle-class families across the country, struggling to navigate the rough waters of the rent crisis. It's a silent battle, fought behind closed doors, yet its effects are felt far and wide. The struggle is real for the Smiths, as it is for many American families. The middle-class rent crisis is more than just individual stories, it's a nationwide issue. Indeed, this crisis is a complex web of interconnected issues that extends far beyond the personal struggles of families like the Johnsons and the Smiths. This rent crisis, my friends, is a reflection of the broader economic and social challenges that our country faces today. Let's consider the economic implications first. The escalating rents are not just a drain on the savings of the middle class. They also divert spending away from other sectors of the economy. When a significant portion of income is tied up in housing costs, there's less to spend on goods, services, and experiences that stimulate economic activity. This, in turn, can lead to slower economic growth, a scenario no one wishes for. Next, let's examine social mobility. The American dream, the idea that anyone can rise up the economic ladder with hard work and determination, is being threatened. The high cost of rent is becoming a barrier to upward mobility. It's harder to save for a home, invest in education, or start a business when you're spending a large chunk of your income on rent every month. And what about quality of life? When families are constantly worried about making rent, it takes a toll. There's less time and money for leisure, less opportunity for relaxation and recreation, and more stress and anxiety. This doesn't just affect individuals, it impacts communities and society as a whole. One can't help but think, how did it come to this? The middle class, once the bedrock of American society, is now caught in a vice of rising rents and stagnant wages. It's a crisis that's been years in the making, and its effects are far-reaching and profound. This isn't a crisis we can ignore, it's a crisis we must face head-on. It's not just about the Johnsons and the Smiths, it's about all of us. The rent crisis is a challenge to our economic vitality, our social mobility, and our collective quality of life. The rent crisis is not just an individual problem, but a national crisis. Is there a way out of this crisis? Yes, we believe there is. The problem is complex, but not insurmountable. Let's explore some of the potential solutions that could provide relief to America's middle class. who are bearing the brunt of the rent crisis. Firstly, government intervention could play a crucial role. The government has the power to implement policies that could alleviate the burden on renters. This could include the development of affordable housing units or providing subsidies to those who are struggling. By addressing the supply and demand imbalance in the housing market, it could help keep rental prices in check. Next, we look at rent control policies. Rent control is a policy that limits the amount landlords can increase rent by each year. This ensures that renters aren't priced out of their homes due to sudden, drastic increases. While this approach has been criticized for potentially discouraging landlords from maintaining their properties, if implemented thoughtfully, it could provide a level of stability for renters. Another potential avenue for relief is the push for higher wages. The middle class has been squeezed by stagnant wages and rising living costs. If companies and employers are encouraged to raise wages, it could help the middle class keep pace with the cost of living. This, in turn, could make rent more affordable. Additionally, financial literacy and education could be a part of the solution. By teaching people how to budget, save, and invest wisely, we could empower them to better manage their finances and potentially avert a personal rent crisis. While these solutions are not perfect, they offer a glimmer of hope. They signal that the rent crisis is not an inevitable reality but a challenge we can tackle. With the right policies, the right mindset, and a collective effort, we can ensure that the American dream is accessible to all, not just the privileged few. While these solutions are not perfect, they offer a glimmer of hope. The unseen battle rages on for America's middle class. A statement that resonates with truth and urgency, as we've come to understand throughout our conversation today. The middle class, the backbone of our society, is caught in the crossfire of a rent crisis that has been brewing beneath the surface for years. We've journeyed together through the reality of the crisis, the staggering facts and figures that paint a picture of an issue far too big to ignore. We've seen the human faces behind these numbers in the stories of the Johnsons and the Smiths, families just like yours and mine, struggling to keep a roof over their heads amidst rising costs. We've zoomed out to look at the bigger picture, at how this crisis isn't just about rent, but about the very fabric of our society. It's about the American dream, the promise of a fair shot at prosperity, and the idea that hard work should be rewarded with stability and security. And we've explored possible solutions, from policy changes to community initiatives, that could start to turn the tide. We've seen the potential for change, the spark of hope that could light the way forward. But the path to resolution is not a straight line. It's a winding road filled with obstacles and challenges that requires collective effort and determination. The middle-class rent crisis is an unseen battle, a silent war fought behind closed doors, in the privacy of homes and in the quiet desperation of families. But it's a battle that ripples out, affecting us all, whether we see it or not. This unseen battle is a call to action. It's a call for awareness, for empathy, for change. It's a reminder that we are all in this together, that the strength of our society lies in the well-being of its people. The middle-class rent crisis is an unseen battle, but it's a battle we must acknowledge and address. For the sake of the American dream, the battle must be won. Because in the end, it's not just about rent. It's about dignity, stability, and hope for a brighter future.